you've met people, you know, in one-on-ones already this week as well, or in coffee chats. But yeah, happy to have you here. I'm running this meeting still. It's the last one I'll be running, of course, and then Maverick will take over starting the next week. And yeah, I should say it was a pleasure to work with everyone here, of course. I've told this to everyone individually as well, but yeah, I'll be right around the corner anyway, so you can hit me up if you want to talk about whatever. Cool. So the next announcement here is a message. I'm reading this message from Darva. So there's a create stage gathering being planned during Summit. And basically there'll be like a room that we get, or that you all get for 15 minutes or so. And so they're going to make a social event out of it, and they're trying to brainstorm ideas. So this is me asking you all, hey, if you have ideas that you want to have considered, afterwards there'll be like a poll for what should we actually do. Please, if you have ideas, just post them in the comment on that issue. The deadline is tomorrow, so just do it right now or like after the call, maybe. Yeah. Lena, do you want to verbalize your point here?
Yeah, I can. So, do we want to talk about something we are doing, like to the wider audience, or we just want to play something like what kind of ideas?
I think it's I think it's going to be like that specific event, like that one sort of create. So it'll be create wide. So it will be for everyone in create, which is about, I don't know, 40, 50 people maybe. And so they're looking here for ideas of social events that people think would be nice to do at this kind of group. I think, yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers the question. If you want to do a team specific thing, I think you can do that somehow. Maybe it's more like in the evenings. Yeah, I think Dasha, you wrote there about dinners, maybe. Yeah. Cool. All right. So Dasha, you have the next announcement actually. Point 3.
Yes, I do. So I know we haven't shared the exact action items that came out from our offsite in Berlin. It's been a little harder to get everybody together and aligned outside of this team. So just I guess be patient as like the AI framework plus us, since we are AI adjacent and we're heavily involved, kind of work through how do we work together, what are some written agreements, who makes decisions, like all of that fun stuff is still being discussed. Like we have a pretty good line of sight into it, but just be patient. And if something doesn't, I'm going back on my be patient, as in like if something doesn't feel right, just call it out, because I think that's how we can actually make change instead of just saying like, oh, okay, this happened once. But if it happens once, it's going to happen twice. So if something is a little bit out of norm, or like, why is this decision being made like now, call it out. And then we can raise it and say like, this is not an okay way of working. So just kind of like look out for some bumps in the road. And if you see anything, it's kind of like the conversation I had with Torsten. We're trying to align on a program level, and they're like, we're going to make everything private, but then we're going to make things public. So it's just this very like hodgepodge of things of like, what is a single source of truth for our chat? So you'll see like some things like that. But yeah, yeah, that's it. I feel like I can go on about it, but I'm going to stop there.
Cool. Thanks for that, Dasha. All right. Moving on to the discussion part here. So there's a couple topics here. I think we have 4 of them. One note, by the way, myself and Maverick have an interview right after this call, so we'll need to just make sure to leave on time. I'm saying this out loud just to keep myself accountable to it as well. All right, so first point here, I wanted to check in on the progress for code suggestions, the various code suggestions like granular control, minimal version check, like the stuff that we discussed last week, all these sort of API checks that need to be done that we need to deploy for Feb 15s. I wanted to check if we were expecting to finish this week or to carry over to the next milestone. And I want to remind folks that the deadline for this was February 15th. So yeah, I'm gonna stop here, and I'll put a link to all the epics here. So it looks like I'm just going to read out there's on VS Code. It sounds like we've released the first 2 ones. Thanks, Lena and Alan.
I put the update there. Yeah, I
Okay,
should
I
have put
see.
them in it. Yeah, so thanks, Lena. Today we released a version check. And we introduced the first major version since 2020 in the VS Code extension, thanks to Lena's reference to Stack Overflow, what
Hold
major
on.
version means.
Hold on, Thomas.
Uh,
Give it a second.
uh,
Everybody say, hey, this is a big release, so claps. Hey,
hey.
there you go.
And then there is the Alan's contribution with the project disabled check. That doesn't work for WebIDE though. There is a problem with how the web version of VS Code communicates with our extension, and it doesn't work yet. So that's partially done. The most important part being desktop, I reckon, but WebIDE still doesn't work. And with the license provisioned, I don't see any issues there really. I haven't started on the actual feature. I spent this week kind of supporting the other two features and doing some refactoring to make it cleaner. But I think it's like 2 days worth of work. I can be pretty confident that unless I have to do lots of cells testing, I can release it on Monday.
Gotcha. And about the second one there, you mentioned the WebID. I guess I have two questions. Do we need to make it work for the WebID by Feb 15th? And if yes, do we know how to do that? Or
No, Alan, like Alan's working on that issue, he would be the best
Okay.
person to ask. I don't think I don't know what are his priorities. It's not difficult change to make, but it will take some time. So it might be tight depending on what his priorities are.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think when we were talking to Kevin about this, he said that Alan would pick up that work, which, yeah, I think we'll probably just need to make sure that it gets done. But I can also check.
Yeah, he did the first part, but there was an
Mhm.
unexpected hiccup with how WebIDE communicates
Oh.
networking errors, and so that's why it doesn't work in WebIDE. But we decided to merge it for desktop to have at least something done instead of keep working on that merge request without merging it.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. All right. I think in point B here, Ali, you started to talk about the JetBrains stuff, so maybe we can jump to that now.
Yeah, there was a problem where JetBrains couldn't access the GraphQL API due to not having the read user scope in our paths. I think we found a way to work around that without breaking it for everyone, which is great. I was really hoping not to do that. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to use the PAT API to check, is their token valid? What scopes does it have? And that way we know if we get unauthorized, is it because the token is wrong or because the API isn't allowing them to access it? So we'll have to implement a workaround until we get people to upgrade their tokens eventually.
And Ali, can I ask what's going to happen if they have token with less privileges, but let's say the code suggestions are disabled for the project, or some, one of these checks should prevent them from using code suggestions, but we want to know that that's the case.
I think we will know. For example, like if we look at their PAT and we see that they have the AI feature scope, then we know that, and it's active, then we know that the token is valid. If we then call the code suggestions endpoint and get 401, I think that's safe enough to say that you don't have a license for code suggestions for the time being. And then later on, once we get them to upgrade their token, we can check it properly.
Maybe we would want to choose some more generic error message, because I think that there are multiple things that can happen. It can be disabled for the project, and that's why you're getting, or not, you are getting 403 when it's disabled for the project. I'm not certain now. There is multiple ways how it can be disabled, and it would be worthwhile checking with Alan. Actually, he's the star outside of our team, star of this catch up, because he implemented a disabled for a project check, and he would know whether you get 401 for that reason as well. And then it might be like license or disabled for the project.
Okay, good to know. I wasn't aware that the code suggestions endpoint would give an error. I don't even think JetBrains sends project information to that endpoint, but still good to know.
Okay. Okay. If you are not sending project information, then you don't have to worry about it for now, I guess.
Cool.
I have a quick question about project information. Who is currently sending project information? And do we have an example of that? Are we just grabbing stuff off of the Git repo and saying that's the path and calling it a day?
We are using GitLab project namespace. I can link you the code. It's one of the payloads when we are like one of the attributes when we are asking for code suggestions. It's like a project namespace or similar property name, and we send it with the request for suggestions.
Okay. So Dasha, we have a feature for whether or not a project is currently provisioned to use code suggestions. Now that's the actual GitLab project path.
Mhm.
Is anyone using that today, or do we know how to get that?
Yeah, I actually think this goes into my next one that I wrote. So there's this large conversation happening around how do we ban AI features, or how do we have those granular controls? Jesse Young did a proposal of, hey, this is how we're thinking it from a namespace perspective and like a root group perspective. I linked it here. So if everybody can read it and take a look at it, it's a really long thread. And I feel like they're still going back and forth, but Alan is implementing part of it now, which is kind of what we're running into with JetBrains. But if we can take a look at it and just make sure that there's nothing that they haven't thought through just because we haven't been part of that conversation, as in like, hey, we'll consume it, but there's obviously other pieces to it. So if we can take a look at it and just say, hey, yep, good plan, as it is a bit of a decision by committee, but at the same time, I think our voice should be heard in it as well.
Just to clarify, John, when I was saying namespace, that is the project path. Namespace is like group or several groups if they are nested, concatenated by / and the project name at the end.
Okay, excellent. Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to look to see if Visual Studio is doing that because I'm not sure. So but we know that VS Code is, so I can definitely check out the expected implementation. Great.
All right, and then I think we're now at point 6, like Roman 6, Dasha, which is yours about token management.
Ooh, okay, yeah, moving fast to this because I know we have a lot. Yeah, token management. I think we should start chipping away at it. Thomas, I linked the previous epic for VS Code to it just because I know there are some things that we're like, we don't know how to solve this, and let's just keep an eye on it in one aggregated place. I'd like for us to maybe do like one issue milestone. If we can get more, it'd be great. Like right now, I know we're getting a lot of functionality pressures. But if we can take a look at the epic, I've prioritized them from the one that Tristan is already working on. But what are your thoughts on picking like one up, running with it, and then kind of slowly chipping away at the problem?
Okay, yeah, so initially I've written down as for response, I didn't realize you're like chipping one away per milestone. I think it'd be great if we could do more, but I think chipping away one at a time is definitely like somewhere to start. I think if we could get documentation just stating what the common permissions errors would be, that would go a very long way. Because right now we sort of have like different error message on 401. And that's not really informative to the user. And that's why a lot of the VS Code issues got created. It was around users getting permissions errors and they weren't sure why based on the different use cases. So I think having a documentation page to start sending people to, and if you could at least get a link in all the IDEs whenever there's a authentication error, you can link to that generic docs page, and that could list like 5 common scenarios, for example. you know, and you could even link to issues about how we would like to improve it in the future for that specific use case.
Okay, and that's I know there's an issue that you created and with Amy about, hey, can we document like these use cases? So kind of piggybacking off of that concept.
Works for me.
Just one word of caution, even though if we're chipping away one at a time, Dasha, let's just make sure that the product team is aware that scope creep is capped with this particular bit. So if we're doing one issue at a time, that is what it is. There is no scope creep given all of the other priorities. Does that make sense? And if so, we can't start this. If there will be scope creep, then we can't start this.
For the token management piece?
Yes. One at a time is cool, but you have to be careful with scope creep. Usually when one issue at a time happens with something new, there's always, just as developers, there's always more. So we have to be very specific on what deliverables we can do with one issue at a time per milestone.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is like having like project disabled. Like we're sort of thinking it was like, hey, that builds off of it because that still relates to permissions errors. And then you end up getting, okay, well, project disabled is a different API check. And now we have to do logic to say, hey, does the API version even support that check? If not, we need to come up with generic logic and like is adding more sort of conditions in until we consider whether there's minimum compatibility versions and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm thinking of two different things. So like with token management improvement and that epic specifically, more about like aggregating what issues I've seen already and kind of so they're not necessarily like a product feature. It's kind of like chipping away at the alleviating some of the issues that we've seen. So I think there's some things with certs, the proxy authentication, but I definitely agree with you, Aaron, as far as like we should definitely buttoned up like, hey, what does that project level setting API look like? And that's definitely on the product getting our stuff in line. But from the epic of improving token management authentication, try to say that 5 times fast. That's more, I think that is more of like, not tech debt, but like addressing customer concerns versus like what's actually on a product roadmap. So I think that one, I 100% agree on like not making it huge and bloated, but I just see it as more of like, yeah, making sure everything's like running smoothly, but rather than like a product request.
Got you.
But I could be wrong. Definitely push back if you feel like this is totally not worth it. Like product, why are you even like talking about this?
I think drawing the line makes a big difference, but the implementation is in a similar place in the code. So that's what I was getting caught up in my head with.
All right, let's move forward to the next point here from Ali, number 7, Roman numeral.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could cut any scope for the 3 issues for February 15th, and if so, what that could be, just because it's gonna be pretty tight. And I was also wondering, when we say February 15th, does that mean we want a new version published and available on February 15th? I'm assuming that's what that means, which is Thursday. That means we have to be done by Wednesday.
I was thinking like what's on the table. We have for the minimum version, the license check, and then project level settings. I think if we can do the license and the minimum version, we can potentially move the project level settings after the 15th.
As like a quick follow-up.
Well, I just feel like the conversation is still going on, and it is very much kind of like the AI ban, like which one are we doing? Like everyone's kind of scrambling. And so since we're picking that work up and then implementing it, I think it's okay if it's a quick follow, that we're not enforcing like the AI ban for that project or for that namespace, because that decision is still being made actively. I haven't checked like that specific issue. But what does everybody else think?
I think when we think about like the versioning, we can like if the stuff that's happening on the monolith and the API ban and whatever rules are going in place there, that's going to happen. And February 15th is going to be like the cutoff for like code complete on some of the stuff. But with the extensions, we can continue to iterate on what that looks like and how we present the user interface. And we're not going to get cut like if the milestone cutoff doesn't impact us because we're able to just release a new version the next day. And like if we released on the February 16th, it's not a huge difference as to whether if we had some generic handling before that February 15th date.
Yeah, but just to be clear, Feb 15 is the is the release date of the monolith. It's not the cutoff date for code changes, right? So I think the cutoff for is probably today or whatever, tomorrow. I'm not sure, but
I think there is some code in the monolith that has a hard-coded date of February 15th. I don't know what time zone, but basically the code itself will start to enforce the license check on February 15th.
Yeah. Because again, February 15th, that's when we're going from you got it for free, now you got to pay. Which will be a fun time, I think, for everybody. I think the field will have a lot of questions since I'm not sure like if customers will actually, if all customers will know, as in like haven't paid for it, hold on. So I think we'll have a couple of days and try to figure it out. And we'll probably get a lot of customer feedback on like, why are you enforcing it like this? Like you need to change it just because it's such a new space for everybody.
But yeah, Ali, just part of your question was, do we need a new version of the plugin? The answer is yes. And we had mentioned in some places feature flags or user settings and things, and this is just a potential solution to controlling when to flip it on. But we don't, like I was talking about with John about this earlier today, that's why I bring it up, that we don't have to do a feature flag if we know that we can just, like in Visual Studio, we might not do one at all and just release the plugin that contains this change on that date. Because the risk there is pretty minimal. So just to mention that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
On JetBrains, I don't know if we could afford to do that. Maybe yes, maybe I'm not sure, but like maybe
we don't really need a flag. I think we can live without it. But yeah, I think the project permission check, that's definitely gonna get pushed past the 15th, and it's good to know that that's okay. The other two, I'm gonna try and get them in. They should be pretty doable.
All right. I'm checking the time. It's 5:26. Maverick, I think we need to head off in like a minute or two max, just to make sure we're on time for the interview. Thomas, I'll just drop off when needed, but Thomas, you can start with the next point.
I think I'm gonna start a flame war, just to to waste your time. I just noticed that, and I totally get Dash's point to like everyone uses their own editor. I'm no exception. I use NeoVim for the last like a year rather than VS Code, except for more complicated tasks like merge conflicts and merge request reviews and stuff like that. That's not in NeoVim, but we had a bug. That's just one reason why I'm starting this topic now. It's not the only reason. The other reason is that if we will be working in VS Code, we will know the interface better and like know the user messages patterns and button, like just the UX in general, we'll know it better and we'll be making the features a little bit better. But this was mainly one of the reasons is that we had a bug that we would discover if we used the extension for code reviews. By the way, using the extension for code reviews, it's epic. If you haven't done it, try it. Like there is, for example, if you are using like Vim for key bindings, the comments in VS Code extension can be operated with Vim. They support Markdown highlighting. It's amazing. You should definitely try. But yeah, so the question was, would we like to, as a team, like say, let's use some features from the VS Code, or are we keen on everybody using their own editor and developing the extension? I guess it translates to like JetBrains and Visual Studio as well. But I guess if you are doing Kotlin, you are doing it in JetBrains. You are not doing it in text edit, like Sublime Text or something. I don't know. What do you all think?
I'm almost never using the editor that I'm working on. So but I'm always testing in that editor. So I always tend to have an experimental instance that I'm running. So I'm all for use what you can get stuff done in faster.
Okay.
Yeah, I certainly use NeoVim as my default editor, but especially in JetBrains, like with debugging the code base in JetBrains, it's a lot easier to do within JetBrains itself. And then like so I'd have like a terminal up with NeoVim, and then I'd have the editor I'm working on and force myself to dogfood the extension as I'm going through. And of course, debugging in VS Code is the same. In VS Code land, it's much easier to debug the VS Code extension.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop off for another meeting, but I'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
I do wonder though, it's as I know we mentioned, like I think Francois mentioned, is it a testing gap? Because as we expand our functionalities, will we be able to touch every single piece of functionality as the extensions grow? That can be very unmanageable. So is it more of like a testing gap?
There is definitely a testing gap. There was an integration test that could, if it was implemented, it could catch this. However, like it's a combination of things. Like, yes, if we have better tests, for sure, it's going to help catch bugs like these. However, there is going to be some that slip through the cracks. You see it in our main GitLab product. Every now and then on the web interface, you're like, oh, what's this weird? Like the smileys are shifted like 10 pixels to the left. That's been recently. And like everybody notices it because we all use it. If we said, like we can review merge requests by sending each other emails, and we don't have to use the GitLab web interface. So let's just let everyone use the process that they are most familiar with. Then some of these issues might slip to customers because we wouldn't be all using the web interface from GitLab. So I don't know. That's what I said. I'm starting a flame war.
Speaking to Dasha's point about us not being able to test everything, hopefully we have enough developers in the company that people would be using all of our extensions, and hopefully they'd feel comfortable like reporting bugs to us similar to how they report GitLab bugs in the Is This Known channel. I haven't really seen that many bug reports coming in internally, but maybe we need to encourage that.
Yeah, very true.
That would be sweet. I wonder how many people have the VS Code extension installed in the company, but I wouldn't be betting that more than like, I don't know, 20%. That would be my like most optimistic estimate.
Our UX research is underway, so we will find out from internal users and customers as to what are they using. I'm waiting for everybody to be like, oh, it's Visual Studio, where there's like no issue or merge request support. And you're like, oh, okay. We are at time. Do we want to drop, or do we want to finish this up, or do we want to finish it async?
Thomas, let's continue the flame war.
Do it.
No, I mean, I definitely agree I think VS Code is probably our most, and I know this from the metrics, that is our most used. So we have a lot of eyes on that one. I think Visual Studio is our least used. And so because there's less eyes, there is a testing gap. And that's one of the reasons why I would say if you're working on an extension, you definitely you should still have your other editor up to that you're working with to see, hey, I mean, I'm seeing this working, or I'm seeing what the current version of this. You're trying to find issues, and we should do that, I think, even if you're using a different editor for your day-to-day coding. That's less flamey than I made it sound like it was going to be.
Yeah, honestly, I'm disappointed, John. So what if you tackled this from the supply side? The GitLab repo flags things that come in without tests. What if that happened here?
We wouldn't catch this. This was fully unit tested features. They just didn't fit well together, and it's far apart in the code base. It would show
Alas.
100%, or would show probably not 100%, but it would show good enough test coverage for both of those parts.
Oh, well.
That's not to say that we shouldn't be surfacing code coverage in merge request reviews. We are not. It's something that we could look into in the VS Code extension project and language server.
I think Francois had point 3. So I'm trying to read it and also understand the GraphQL is just like this concept that I'm like, hold on, I understand it, but I need to like absorb it, think it. Aaron, do you wanna?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll verbalize Francois's points as well. So Francois was just sort of alluding to the chat timeline. It looks like we're missing a piece required for end-to-end testing of GraphQL. That is related to the Apollo client and doing subscriptions. GraphQL, you have queries where you can ask for data from the GraphQL API. You can do mutations, you modify data in the backend through the GraphQL API. And there's subscriptions. So the first two were working, but subscriptions were failing due to protocol issues. Finally today I have that mostly working. I'm gonna put a draft demo up with what I currently have. And once that draft demo is up, then people can test locally. Just by like I'll have like a separate integration test with like it disabled by default, so it's pending. But if you run the integration test manually and set your GitLab token, it'll actually create an actual client using the WebSocket subscription. Right now, the progress I've got is I've got all the messages coming through, but Action Cable isn't implemented fully. So I'm just going to be implementing the Action Cable protocol, which now I've actually got the exact messages and I can implement the protocol. So I might even just finish that protocol piece before I push up the MR. So yeah, good progress on that to address Francois's question.
I know it was a tricky bit of work, so thanks for taking that on, Aaron.
No worries at all.
All right. I think I have the last one. So we have a question from the field, from Pierre-Antoine. And I think we'll be getting more and more of these as customers are like, can we look at it? Can we try it? So the ask is, hey, they're trialing it till the end of the month. Can we give them early access to JetBrains Chat? I think from the product side, we're going to set very clear expectations, as in like, this is not the finished product. So we can set all those expectations, but I want to gauge as in like, do we want to do that? What state is it in today? Are we comfortable with like, yeah, try it out. Give us feedback. What did we miss?
I think we have something to deliver that's a good, it's a good trade-off because we get some direct feedback. I'm usually for that.
How rough of a product are we comfortable sharing with them?
Can I take a look at it first?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think we should get internal users to use it first.
Yes.
Got everything integrated, and then once we've got that, we can go forward. Technically speaking, if we tie in together with the mutation and query instead of using subscription, so it's streaming. So I guess yeah, like the way it works in VS Code is we stream chat responses as they come through. What we could do as a quick workaround is we could send messages and we could receive messages on just on a timer. So we time getting the responses back just to populate the UI. That would be fairly quick to do. But ideally, we wait until streaming is done and then give customers an example of streaming after we've got a little bit of internal use.
So the potential caveat is like you won't have streaming with chat. Okay, I'll touch base with him. But if we can take a look at it, do we just want to publish a version extension? I'm not sure what to call it. Just to us so we can internally test it, and then we can kind of make the call as in like, hey, yep, let's go ahead and give it to them, whether it's next week or the following week. Does that work?
I will, after I finish the protocol stuff, my next piece was going to be the action. Like I can do the sort of like the taking John's code and tying it together with my code. Once that's done, we'll have a better idea of what it'll take. So
Sweet. Okay. Cool.
I'll drop a note in that conversation. I seen that on Slack, so I'll drop a note and say I'll update the person.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. I think that's it. Anything else we haven't mentioned?
I
Top
have
of
a
mind.
I have a real quick question about project level code suggestion and enablement. I didn't see anything that was called out specifically for this as a non-GitLab project. Do we just, so if we get a 404 back, we're going to assume, hey, you're good to go. We don't recognize this project ID. We're not going to block.
I think there is a comment from Alan somewhere, I don't know, in some epic or issue related to that, where he talks about a bunch of us were discussing how it was going to work. And I remember I remember Alan mentioning that, hey, if GitLab doesn't know this project, you can go ahead and give code suggestions. But
Cool.
we should probably find the previous discussion and like summarize it into the detailed requirements and behaviors, since it's a bit unclear.
Yep. The only other thing I'm gonna call out, because I'm always, you know, on Team Language Server, because there are these like lots of different business logic that's going to be the same logic that needs to be applied to every extension. That's a wonderful use case in the long run for putting that in the language server.
And
Thomas
I'll
is like,
talk
"Yeah,
to
it is."
language server. And I'll find out the official, like, from chat and code suggestions, is in like, are we okay with them using it on a non-GitLab project? And that's like, if you have a license, go nuts. But, or is it more of like, you can only use this on GitLab projects? And maybe that's the part
Right.
that they missed. So I'll follow up with that today.
Cool.
Sweet. Cool. I will stop streaming and I have to drop. So are we okay to call it? Cool. One piece of stand-up that I always miss is like the clapping. Did you guys ever clap at the end of stand-ups back in the day? No? I feel like I'm just dating myself. It's like 1, 2, 3, slap. Okay. All right. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your day or beginning of your day, and we'll see each other in Slack.
Bye.